everybody. Can you guys hear me? Okay, good. So full disclosure, I had a really, really cool slideshow prepared that took me weeks to do, and my laptop got blue screen of death the other day when I logged on to put it on a flash drive. So I was up till about 2 in the morning throwing something together. But that's okay, because mostly what I'm going to be doing today is just kind of telling you guys the story of this crazy little shelter that I ran in Kirby, Texas, which is right outside San Antonio. I lovingly refer to it as my slow descent into madness. But it's okay. It was fun. It was a fun 5 years. We got the shelter going. So my name's Christie Banduch. A little bit of background on me. I'm an animal control officer in Bexar County, Texas now. I've been with Bexar County for about 6 months. I've done animal control for about 16 years, though. I started out at the Animal Defense League in San Antonio in 2000 as a kennel tech. Worked my way up there to a vet tech, worked for San Antonio Humane Society for a little while. Then I transitioned into the field working for Shirts Animal Services, which is a little suburb of San Antonio. At the time, it was about 5,000 people. By the time I left, it was about 40,000 people. Huge community as far as growth. Then from Shirts, after about 6 years there, I was a senior animal control officer. I somehow got wrapped up in this crazy little story with Kirby. One of our detectives in Shirts was actually on Kirby's city council. They identified that they had some problems at the shelter, asked me to come in and consult with them on, ways to fix some of the problems that they had, and that begins the story. So once upon a time, there was a little shelter in Kirby, Texas. It had been in operation for about 20 years, but nobody really knew it existed. It was very much a catch and kill operation. I'd done animal control at that point for about 10 years in the San Antonio area, and I had no idea that Kirby had a shelter. It's 10 miles from where I live. No idea it was even there. So like I said, in June of 2011, I was asked to provide a consult. The city council and city administration had identified some problems with the shelter. The shelter at the time had been staffed by one person, kind of a rotating door of people coming through the shelter. Nobody who had really been there long. According to the records, when I first went in to do this consult, just first thing off the bat, what are the numbers? What are we looking at? What are you guys bringing in? About 17 animals a month were coming into the shelter. It was 209 animals for all of 2010. That was according to the records. They used Pet Point. So there were 16 dog kennels and 1 cage bank for 9 cats. That's all the shelter had. Really tiny little shelter. The city police department had been responding to stray animal calls, and the public works department had been cleaning and feeding because the one employee that they had recently let go. So at the time I started, there was absolutely nobody at the shelter. The vaccines at the shelter were being improperly stored. They were sitting out on a shelf, unrefrigerated, and they were about 6 months expired. Looking at the adoption records, these animals were actually being sent home with vaccines on their records that had been expired by 6 months as well. So nobody was being properly vaccinated. There weren't enough food bowls to feed the animals with. The public works guys were having to feed half the dogs, pick up the bowls, wash them, and then feed the other half of the dogs. The food was infested with insects and larvae. It was just in big plastic drums. It had like cobwebs in it. It was horrible. There was no supplies at all for cat care anywhere in the building. There was no litter boxes, no cat food bowls, no cat food, no litter, nothing. No proper cleaning agents or supplies. They were actually using Tide laundry soap to clean the kennel, which smelled really nice, but made the floor kind of slippery and probably wasn't doing much for disease management. The dogs in the kennels were, it was an indoor-only kennel. There was no guillotine doors. It's basically like a big garage was how they had built this shelter. It had an overhead door, so that was your source of ventilation, and 2 like teeny tiny little windows on either side, so you could get a little bit of a cross breeze, but not much. It basically was an easy bake oven for dogs, was what that was. There was nowhere to put the dogs when they were cleaning, because there was no guillotine doors and no outside portions to the kennels. So basically what they were doing is they were taking the dogs, chaining them to the fence side by side on the outside while they were cleaning the kennels with Tide. There was no water buckets. They had like little teeny tiny dishes. They were filling those in the morning, probably not refilling them throughout the day. And again, this is June. At this point in time, the kennel was insanely hot. Those were constantly spilled. The first time I went to the shelter, I actually spent my time going through filling water bowls for the dogs instead of touring the facility. The deceased animal freezer was in the lobby with an air freshener on top of it, and it was full of bodies, and I had to paint. That was one of the first things I did, was get that out of there and paint. It was really bad. So that's inviting, when you have people coming in to adopt. Here's our freezer full of bodies. The euthanasia log actually had more animals recorded in it than PetPoint, which is the animal management system they used, showed had been received. So that was kind of curious. Obviously, there's something going on with the record keeping. From the numbers that were in the euthanasia log, combined with the animals that were in PetPoint, we kind of went through and cataloged and saw what was doubled up and what wasn't on those. We were able to deduce that there was probably somewhere in the ballpark of about a 96% euthanasia rate. There were 4 bottles of Fatal Plus euthanasia solution that were being stored in a shelf in a back room that wasn't locked. The room wasn't locked, nothing was locked. They were just sitting out. And next to that, there were several boxes of 1.5" 16-gauge needles. Is anybody here experienced with performing euthanasias? And you know what 1.5" long needles that are 16 gauge, that's a huge needle. If you guys don't know anything about needles, that's huge. You're not doing vein sticks with that. You're pretty much doing heart shots with that. There was no sedation that would have been appropriate for doing that. No smaller needles where they would have been doing anything. So, according to PetPoint records, a total of whopping 3 animals had been adopted out in the preceding year. None of those were spayed or neutered. None of them were currently vaccinated for rabies. The vaccines that they had been given had been expired, and none of them were microchipped. Cats were being euthanized on intake. That explained why there was no cat care supplies. There was no reason to have them. They were just killing them when they came in. There was no phone, no internet. How do you run a business without phone and internet? So this is where I came in to this mess. That was the short list of problems. I could go on for the full hour and a half about all the little stuff that was wrong. That was kind of the major stuff, the big bullet points. So I take on this mess. It's a challenge. I'm like, yeah, okay, we can get this going. It's not a total loss, The first order of business was get the freezer out of the lobby. That was the absolute first thing that happened. But from there, we had to try to make sense out of what was going on. We had to try to figure out what had been done, what already existed, what supplies we had. Everything was just kind of a mess. There wasn't even a broom closet in this place, so there was no storage, there was no anything. So what did we have that was even salvageable as far as records and supplies? For my first week, I had Public Works just go ahead and continue cleaning the kennels, feed the animals. The dogs were okay, they were being fed, they were watered, I kind of monitored it. We had to get cleaning supplies that were appropriate. All of that needed to happen before I could go into a full takeover. So I spent my first week, I painted to get the smell out of the lobby, and sorted through records, inventoried everything that we have, organized the office space. What paperwork do we have that works? What do we have that doesn't work? We got all the way down to what we had and just decided, it's just going to be easier to just start over. So we just scrapped everything. I actually ended up with the last pile of records that looked like they were anything important. I just kind of set them in the bottom of the filing cabinet in case I ever needed them. We revamped everything. Every piece of paperwork in that place went through and reorganized all of that where it made a little bit more sense. So once I'd identified what was needed versus what I have, I had to call in the troops. Everybody I knew at every other local shelter and rescue group, hey, it's Christie. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I've got. Here's what I don't have. What do you have? As everybody knows, there's a barter system in animal sheltering. Somebody has too much newspaper and somebody else doesn't have enough dog food and you can swap, And so that's more or less what I did. So I had care packages, truckloads of supplies were coming from other shelters. Take a dog with you, take 10 dogs with you. The shelter was already full. At this point, it had been 3 weeks to about a month of having no shelter employees. The police were picking up dogs. Public Works was cleaning. They were kind of piled up all over the place. So as you bring me stuff, please take this. So I came up with a preliminary budget after that for supplies that we needed, that the city needed to provide, which was going to be like our cleaning solution, Obviously, no rescue or shelter is going to be able to donate a 55-gallon drum of Parvicide to us. That's going to be something the city is going to have to provide. We had no operating budget of our own. The shelter had been operating off of the Public Works budget. It didn't have its own line item, so it was pretty much like, oh, I need some dog food, and Public Works would run out to Walmart and buy them some dog food with the city credit card. Like, that was pretty much all we had to work with. So the fiscal year didn't even start until October 1st. This is June, so I have no way of getting a budget of my own until October. So what I had to do was basically figure out how I was going to piggyback off of other departments and what resources they had left in their budget to get what I needed, bare bones minimum, to make the place run. Again, I had no internet. Pet Point's an internet-based program for managing animals, so I couldn't even start record keeping there at the shelter. I had to drive down to the police department, use their computer. Didn't have a phone, so I had our dispatch basically working as our answering service, and then they could contact me on the radio or on the phone, if there was something pressing I needed to address. So after about the first week, I started to do the daily cleaning, feeding, stuff like that, that Public Works had been doing. It was more or less organized by then, as organized as it was going to be. I was the only employee, so you got to have days off. You'll go nuts if you don't have days off, so I would have them go ahead and clean and feed on the weekends. It took a while of working with them to get them to start doing it the right way, because they would still go in and just throw down Tide. It was like, no, we have stuff now. So I also began taking calls at this point in the community for loose dogs or whatever. I was probably averaging about 10 calls a day on top of having to do the cleaning, feeding, paperwork, everything else that had to happen. At this point in time, we probably had still about 25 dogs in the shelter. So the kennels took about 4.5, 5 hours to clean every day. Again, they didn't have guillotine doors, so I couldn't run the dogs outside and hose everything out. And I wasn't going to just tie the dogs to the fences and chain them up to the fences side by side. That was crazy. They were choking themselves. You can't do this. So what I did was, as the shelters had brought in care packages, some of them had crates. And so I had, I think, a total of 3 decent-sized dog crates. So I could take the medium-sized dogs or the large dogs, put them in the crate, take them potty, put them in the crate, clean their kennel. I could maybe do 2 or 3 at a time. If I had little dogs in the kennel, I could kind of stick them in a cat cage or in my office for a few minutes while I clean theirs. So sometimes I could do 4 kennels at a time. But any of you guys who have cleaned kennels know that it's time consuming to do it correctly. And when you can only do 4 at a time, and you have to move the dogs back and then do the next 4, instead of just being able to go down and hose the whole thing out, that's not very efficient. So it was hot. Like I said, it was an easy bake oven for dogs. So I went out of pocket, because the city had no budget for this, and I got the big giant fans and put those up in the kennel, and I got some evaporative coolers, put those in there. First order of business, it was going to be our big project, was going to be redesigning these kennels, though, to add somehow guillotine doors and outside portions. We had no vets that were working with us at the time. I actually called the local vet, Kirby Animal Hospital, to ask them for help. And the first thing they said to me is, well, are you going to be nice? I think I'm going to be nice, But they didn't have a good working relationship with the people who had been there prior. So that took a little bit of kissing up to get them to start working with us. And they actually became a really great partner for us. So again, I had to redo all of the paperwork, adoption applications and contracts. I didn't even have those. Surrender paperwork, owner reclaim paperwork. We didn't have citation books. I don't know how you're doing any kind of law enforcement without citation books. Didn't have door hangers to leave anything. I had to create all of that from scratch. And actually what I did was I went and borrowed from some of the other shelters that I had worked with where I knew they had good paperwork. I said, just why reinvent the wheel? Send me what you have and I'll tailor it. But that was pretty time consuming to get just to where we had paperwork where we could operate off of. So from June 20th, 2011, which was my first day there, to the end of the year, we received 589 dogs and cats. So remember that for all of 2010, they had taken in 209, according to their records. So in just this short period of time, I took in a little more than double that. So that was something where I'm looking at it now going, okay, how many were actually coming in? We still don't know. I have no idea how many were actually coming in and just not being recorded. Again, the euthanasia records showed probably about 300 animals in that. So I think the number was actually probably somewhere in between there, between 209 and probably around 400 that she was picking up. But it wasn't a lot. She really wasn't getting out there in the community trying to do anything. Herd health. Herd health is a thing. If any of you guys work with livestock, you know what herd health is. It applies to dogs and cats too. The first major hiccup that I encountered almost right off the bat, probably 2 weeks in, was parvo. Lots and lots and lots of parvo. Because the dogs and puppies, adults, everybody had been tied out to the fence while they were cleaning, that whole backyard was just infested with it. And aside from parvo, at the shelter, it was rampant in the community as well. A lot of what was coming in, probably at least half of what was coming in was either parvo, distemper, parvo and distemper, site of hookworms, dash of heartworms, kind of a conglomeration of every medical problem you could think of. Nothing was coming in healthy. Everything had hair loss. Everything had heartworms, something. So that's an issue. We're not going to get anywhere real fast when everything coming in is sick, so why are they coming in sick? So we started looking at numbers, and we started looking at demographics. Demographics, the devil was in the demographics in Kirby. Kirby is about 2.5 square miles, has a population of about 8,500 to 9,000. It's about 5,000 households. Primarily residential. There's not really a lot of business there. I think there's like 2 Mexican food restaurants, a Dairy Queen. Everyone has a Dairy Queen. There's a couple churches, a couple auto body shops. Other than that, it's residential. 2.5 square miles with 9,000 people, you're kind of packed in there just with houses. So 65% of the community was below the poverty level according to the census. That's a lot. When 65% of your community is receiving government assistance or is on food stamps, anything like that, the below poverty level, that's a pretty high number for a small community. So there was no access to any kind of programs to help low-income pet owners with spay, neuter, vaccinations, anything. So that was an issue. So that to me was, okay, well, here's why we have our problem with parvo and distemper and heartworms and hookworms and mange and everything else coming in. You know, these people can't afford, there's one vet in town, nobody can afford to take their animals there. So called a few of the traveling low-cost clinics. That was my first thought is, well, we'll just have them come in and start doing vaccine drives. Well, they were so booked up, there was no, I mean, they could do like maybe one here and then maybe one next January and 2 a year. Not enough that it was going to make an impact. But I did have a couple vets who were willing to volunteer their time, so we set up bi-monthly low-cost wellness clinics in Kirby on our own. And that was kind of an undertaking because there's a lot of organization that goes into that, and like I had nothing else to do with cleaning kennels and dealing with the sick animals and running calls, but it was worth it to me to do that. So we started these up. We did them actually at the police department because no one could find the shelter. We were back in a cul-de-sac, no sign. Address didn't even pop up on Google if you tried to Google it. So we did those at the police station so that we were visible. We did the vaccines, deworming, heartworm test, prevention, microchipping, all of that. So we did that at extremely low cost. We were doing the rabies shots at about $8, which was cheaper than any of the other low-cost clinics in town. And it wasn't about making the money, it was about making sure these animals were vaccinated because that saves me money in the long run when I'm not having to treat everything for parvo or whatever it has coming in. So we had a good response. We were probably seeing 150 animals at each clinic right off the bat. I think we did one where we saw almost 300 animals. We were there all day and all night. It was crazy. It was just me and one vet. You know, I was teching and she was doing paperwork, and I had a volunteer doing a little bit of the paperwork as people were checking in. So it was pretty chaotic, but within about 6 months, there was a major reduction. It took a while. We had people coming from outside Kirby, and that was okay. We didn't want to make it for just Kirby residents. If you're showing up and you want to get your animal vaccinated, let's do it. We also made a little bit of revenue for the shelter off of these. Even at the low cost, we were making enough. I could treat a dog for heartworms with what I made, you know, so it was worth it. So the more the merrier. But we did see a drastic decrease in illness. Lot less mange. Parvo almost stopped. So that was good, and we continued those all throughout the time I was there. So, turning the ship. By the end of 2011, which was still my first year there, I got the ship pretty well turned. We were facing the right direction, but I had to kind of heave-ho and get it moving in the right direction at that point. You can be facing the right direction all day long, but, you know, you're not moving anywhere. So business was slow. We had no sign. We had no advertising budget. We had really nothing. We didn't have any internet still, so I couldn't get on social media yet and even use that. So we'd been primarily relying on rescue partners to come and pull dogs, you know, begging and pleading, come take one, take two, take as many as you can. Again, no advertising budget, no sign. No one even knew we had a shelter at this point. Residents in this tiny city, everybody I talked to, Kirby has an animal shelter. It's right there. You can throw a rock at it from your house and hit it. We're right around the corner. Nobody knew. Saturday adoption events were our only outlet for the animals other than rescue groups. So I would have to come in at about 5 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays, clean the kennels, feed everybody, get everybody loaded up to the adoption event by, you know, 9 or 10, whenever it was scheduled for. Do all day, you know, sitting out there with the animals, trying to get them adopted. Thank God for volunteers. I would have not been able to do any of this without them. Here's some of the flyers we did. I like to do kind of out-of-the-box flyers. I don't like boring flyers where it's like adoption event this Saturday. I almost got in trouble for the I'm too sexy for my kennel when my police chief didn't like that one. But I thought it was cute. So, and some of these ideas I actually stole. There's a little black book of adoption event ideas, and I think it's through the ASPCA or American Humane, one of the two. But some of these ideas I kind of stole, and I kind of just, you know, tweaked them and made them kind of for Kirby instead of just general. But, you know, I would put out flyers all over town, and it was and look, behind the fire station on Ackerman, you couldn't Google it, here's how you find us. You know, so, and we started to see more people coming in to the shelter from there. Unfortunately, because Kirby's a low-income area, a lot of it was for animal surrenders. Because, oh, we have a shelter, I can bring my animal here. It wasn't a lot of adoptions that were coming out of this, but people were figuring out we existed, so I'll take it. And we also started doing adoption events at the shelter. We did one where we stayed there till midnight. It was the cat's pajama party. I think we did one adoption like right at midnight, but, you know, hey, people were coming in. And then we did a back to school one too. That was kind of an outside the box. You don't really think of back to school when you think of animal shelters, but we had a group called Project Rescue Runway, and San Antonio came in, and they did a little doggy fashion show, and they were handing out little bags with back to school supplies and stuff. So it drew in a lot of families with kids, which is good, because then the kids are like, I want this puppy. And so those kind of events kind of worked for us. Fundraising, the first year we did a really big fundraiser called Paws in the Park. It was just kind of a general, let's go to the park and have a barbecue fundraiser, but we had a really awesome team of realtors who had an outreach program who kind of took on our cause. We were able to raise $10,000 for the shelter. So that was significant because I still had no budget. So what I used that revenue for was to renovate those kennels and get guillotine doors put into place. We actually found an Eagle Scout who was a very ambitious Eagle Scout because this was a huge project. But he took on this entire project. He basically gave him the design of what we wanted, and he went in and figured out all of the engineering. He got all of the permits he needed to do it. Got other Eagle Scouts who needed their projects. Altogether, I probably had like 20 Eagle Scouts building kennels, and they were in there masonry work and rebar and everything else. Pouring concrete, like they did a great job. Those kennels are actually better than the inside of the building that Kirby had built. Got it built by teenagers, and it was like, it actually works. So, social media, at the point in time that I had internet finally, and basically what we did was we just put in a wireless bridge to Public Works next door. So it's essentially stealing internet at this point because the city wouldn't give me my own. We started a, sorry? Oh, sorry, so something. So we had a question. So we started a big social media campaign. Social media is your new best friend when you have no advertising budget. It's better than nothing. So what we did was we did a Harlem Shake. We did pretty much anything and everything that you could think of. Our dog in the middle there, we were LeBron in. It was when the Spurs were in the playoffs and they were making fun of LeBron James. So pretty much everything we could do that was kind of outside the box that would get people interested. It wasn't just your standard, here's a cute dog post. You know, we would run our adoption specials and stuff on that, and slowly we started getting a following, and slowly we started getting more business. But there was a lot of growing pains. In 2012, I think in May or March or May of 2012, I added my first employee, and there he is, and he hates it when I use that picture, so that's why I did it. So he had started volunteering at the shelter when he was about 17. He'd just turned 18. They were hiring somebody. I wanted to put on the job description that the first requirement is you have to be certifiably nuts. They wouldn't let me put that on there. But he worked out great because I already knew he was crazy, so he would be able to hang with it. I had a budget now. We're now into the fiscal year. My annual budget for just the animal care, not including salaries and all of that, was about $20,000. That broke down to about $15 per animal with the numbers that we had coming in. Not a lot you can do with $15 per animal. Just in fiscal year or calendar year 2012, we took in 1,279 animals with 16 dog kennels, 9 cat cages, 2 people now. I had a second person for the second half of the year, and we had about $15 an animal to work with. And we somehow had to figure out how to get them spayed, neutered, microchipped, everything. So we had to reduce the number of animals coming in, one. That was way too many. For 16 kennels and 9 cat cages, 1,279 animals a year with 2 people taking care of them, the math on that doesn't work. So the logical way to do that quickly was TNR for cats. I can't TNR dogs, but I can TNR cats, and I can reduce the number of cats coming in. If I'm not taking care of cats, I have more time for the dogs. That was my logic. So by 2013, remember I had no record keeping before that was accurate. So by 2013, about a year and a half, almost 2 years in, I had gathered enough data to actually start contemplating what it would take to do that. Some of it was the formulas that exist out there for calculating the number of cats you have and how many are likely to be unaltered. And some of it was just tribal knowledge and going through our areas where all of our cats are coming from this trailer park. Let's go over here and figure out what's going on, and let's get an actual head count the best we can on them. So we identified, I think it was 1,200 was our target number for cats in Kirby that we wanted to fix. We actually ended up fixing considerably more than that. So we started this massive TNR program. I'm not going to do TNR and one cat comes in and I fix it and release it. That's not getting me anywhere. That's one cat. And yeah, I don't have to house it, but if we're going to do this, let's actually do this. So in August of 2013, I sold my soul to PetSmart Charities and got a $46,130 grant for TNR, which for a small community, that was kind of a huge grant. Most, you don't expect them to dump that much money into a 2.5-mile city. So that was huge, and that was to fix about 1,200 cats, was what we had factored that in for. It was a 2-year grant. My goal was to try to get it done in 1 year because I'm kind of overambitious, but it ended up taking us kind of the full 2 years anyway. We spayed 1,678, so we kind of blew that number out of the water. Tapped into my budget a little bit to do it, but while the getting's good, get them, trap them. So the shelter's tiny. It was like a path in between the traps. We'd have them just lined up on the walls, and we were doing sometimes 40 or 50 a day. And we didn't have a surgical facility at the shelter, so we had to trap them, take them to the clinics that we were using for this, which sometimes included coming to the Austin Humane Society when they had their grant money to kind of help offset the cost of it. So we included own cats in this grant. A lot of the grants that I see are just for stray or feral cats where you have to bring them in the trap, and own cats are part of the problem too. If you've got a cat and it's running around outdoors and it's constantly getting pregnant, it needs to be fixed too. So we included those in there as well. So we were able to advertise to the community, hey, we're getting, free spay neuter for your cats if they're an outdoor cat. So we didn't really care if they were indoor or outdoor. If they're not fixed, they're part of the problem. So in 2014, during the first year of the grant, we saw about a 60% reduction in the number of cats that we received. We were pretty much hanging on to if we had neonatal kittens coming in or, a litter of kittens that was, 8 weeks old that was adoptable. If we had older cats that, were geriatric or injured and stuff like that, we would keep those back at the shelter. But pretty much everybody else we TNR'd. It was just cut the head off the snake and get it done and stop the breeding, and then we'll go back and figure out what to do after that. By 2015, when we completed that grant, we had seen about a 90% reduction in the number of cats we received. In 2013, I think I had 60 cats at one time with only 9 cat cages. So it was mamas with litters, so, you got multiple cats in every cage. And then we had like ferret cages and crates set up everywhere too that we would temporarily house them in. By 2015, when we saw that 90% reduction, I think I had like 4 litters of kittens come in for the entire year, and they were all like dumped at the park, so we have no idea, if they actually originated in Kirby or not. But very, very few were coming in from Kirby, and the ones that we were keeping were, like I said, the ones that were injured, or if we did get a litter of kittens under a shed or something, we'd pretty much go out and try to find mom and get her fixed too. So all the cool cats are doing it. That was our marketing. We made little signs with this guy on it, and it said all the cool cats are doing it. We'd put those up in what area we were trapping in. The way we did it was kind of cool. We went in, it was a lot of data tracking, but we went into Kirby, and we kind of cut Kirby into like 12 little zones, and it was like just a few blocks on each zone. Like the mobile home park would be one zone, and then the 2 streets over here were another. And we kind of got a head count in each zone of how many cats we thought were in each one, and which ones were our biggest problems that we needed to address first. And that way we weren't just willy-nilly running around Kirby trapping cats and not being able to keep track. We actually started in zone 1, which was the mobile home park. We got about 200 cats just out of that one mobile home park. So that was our first zone, and then we kind of just worked our way in a circle around the city. So any area that we were trapping in, we put the signs out that had that so that people were aware, this is what we're doing, we're trapping, you can get your cat fixed for free. And that was really cool because we had a good community response from that. I have videos, I don't know if you want to watch them. A big thing for me was changing animal control's image. Animal control, it's the dumb dog catcher. It's, they don't care. They just want to kill everything. And especially with the situation we had in Kirby, the few people that did know about the shelter weren't real impressed with it. So we wanted to get out and change the image of the shelter. See if we can do this without it playing any ads.
The newest 4-legged crime fighter is now the only canine officer at the Gonzales County Sheriff's Office. Bill Barajas got to meet Carmela and the local business working to help law enforcement agencies who might not have had the funds to afford her otherwise.
Sniffing out trouble, or illegal drugs in this case, is what Carmela does best.
Drugs, money, got a couple of vehicles that we got taken to the department.
Carmela is the newest member and only canine at the Gonzales County Sheriff's Department, a small department about 70 miles east of San Antonio. But her life wasn't always so glamorous. Carmela was a shelter dog and facing doggy death row when she was rescued by Universal Canine.
Most of these dogs are the dogs that don't find homes because they have so much energy that, people are just like, I can't handle a dog like that.
Universal Canine rescues and trains all types of dogs. They've been doing it for years. Their latest program focuses on pit bulls.
We do adoption events every weekend, and having Brad as someone who help us get these dogs out, it's amazing because sometimes it's hit or miss when it comes to the shelter system.
The tail wagging rescues are trained in 4 to 8 weeks and then given to law enforcement agencies across the country at no cost.
I had noticed that there were departments out there that were needing these dogs that couldn't afford the $10,000 to $15,000 dogs.
Carmela trains daily. Balancing work and play is something she doesn't struggle with, though. She even has her own Facebook page. Carmela, like most of these shelter dogs, is taking advantage of her second chance at life by loving and serving.
She's a family member big time. Her and I have built a truly strong bond.
Bill Barajas, KSAT 12 News.
So she was an awesome dog. We had her for about 6 months at the shelter. She was great. She was great with everybody, but she was so high energy. Some dogs need a job. Not every dog is cut out for a home life. Some of them need jobs. We don't have to watch all of these. I just kind of had them on there, unless you want to put them on. And then the one I was telling you about, Kaya, I don't know, the ones that went to Poughkeepsie Police Department in New York that's been getting a lot of media attention. She came from our shelter. She had actually been hit in the head with a hammer in a like Dollar General type store parking lot. And so when I got there, I was so sure she was going to have a depression fracture in her head. I mean, it was just a hole in her head. So we took her straight in for x-rays, and I think the big pit bull head was what saved her. She had that thick skull. So there was no fractures, but she still has to this day like a big knot on the top of her head from it. It was like the cartoon whoop whenever she got hit. But that was one program that we did, and we had a lot of good media exposure from that. Like I said, not all dogs are going to do great in a home environment. Kaya would have been horrible in a home. She was the sweetest dog. She loved everybody, but she was like a 90-pound tube of muscle that just wanted to go, go, go. And unless you had some really big guy with a whole lot of energy who really liked to run, she was going to be returned over and over and over again. So that was a really good outlet for those animals. We actually got some national media attention for that too. We ended up on the ABC Nightly News with Universal Canine over that program as well, so that was pretty cool. At this point, we had become the first municipal shelter in the Bexar County metro area to reach and retain no-kill status. There was no-kill shelters, but as far as municipal shelters went, most of them were still euthanizing quite a bit. So in the 5 years that I was there, we received well over 6,000 animals coming in. Not one was ever euthanized for space, and our euthanasia rate averaged at about 7%. We did euthanize if animals were aggressive. If we had some kind of just a crazy illness that, quality of life wasn't going to be there, or we had a poor prognosis for it, we would euthanize those guys. But it's from 96% kill rate to 7%. Overnight was pretty good. So it's hard to maintain it, but we did it. There was days I'd be waving the white flag, just going, please, somebody come get this dog. We had bathroom dogs sometimes. It was like if there's a door that shuts, there's a dog behind it most of the time there. But, they were having their needs met, and we were moving them as fast as we could. Nobody was crammed in any kind of cruel confinement issue like you see it. I've seen some shelters where I'm like, you can't put that big dog in that little crate. And then everybody was exercised. We had a really good team of volunteers that would come in and exercise everybody and do enrichment and stuff. That's important, too. Mental health of your animals is every bit as important as physical health. So after, I want to say in 2013, after a few years in this crazy mess, opportunity knocked. It's a never-ending math problem. Trying to fit 100 animals a month into a shelter with 16 kennels and 9 cat cages, that doesn't go away, Even with the cats not coming in, we were able to focus more on dog pickups, and so our dogs did increase. So that was kind of an unintended consequence. But at the same time, we were getting them off the street. Kirby's one of those towns where, like, everywhere you go, there's like a pack of 12 dogs running around. So we were able to start picking off some of those packs whenever I wasn't cleaning cat cages for half the day. So we needed more space, and we needed it yesterday. I'm not a big fan of constantly expanding your shelter, and here's why. If we had an outbreak of Ebola, and the CDC decided to come in and say, we're just going to keep building more and more and more hospitals to house all the sick people, and then we're going to have these volunteers over here hold bake sales to pay for the vaccines. That doesn't make any sense. So I'm not a big fan of constantly expanding, but we didn't have enough space to house what was already coming in, let alone the increases that we were seeing in what was coming in. So we did need to expand. So that's when the opportunity knocked. The city of San Antonio announced in 2013 that it was dropping its contract with Bexar County. San Antonio had been providing the animal control for Bexar County for God only knows how many years. So all of a sudden, Bexar County was left with this situation where it was going to have to do animal control, and it had no idea what to do. Well, I'm a capitalist. I saw it, and I said, hey, this might be a golden ticket. So knowing that they didn't have a shelter of their own, I called Andy, who is the supervisor for Bexar County Animal Control. Said, hey, come talk to me. I'd never met him before. I said, hey, let's have a chat. Maybe I can help you. Maybe you can help me. So he came over, and it started out, me and him in the office, just, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could build a shelter? Wouldn't it be cool if they gave us $3.5 million to build this facility, and then we could just run it together, and it'll be great? So it was a pretty simple deal. Hey, build us a shelter, and we'll run it for you. So we took it to our supervisors, thinking they were going to go, yeah, right, no, we're not going to give you $3.5 million. So what started out as that all of a sudden became a reality. And we had our commissioners court and our city councils talking all of a sudden, and we went, oh, are they actually going to give us money? So they started discussing an interlocal agreement, because when you're going to take a city and a county who are both governmental agencies and you're going to merge them into one thing, you got to have some kind of a working agreement on that. And they're never easy. They're always complicated because attorneys. So that's actually was the biggest hang up with this was attorneys and all of the requirements and hoops they had us jump through. So they started discussing it, though. It was on the table, and let's talk about how this would actually work and how, what would this actually cost. So Andy and I crunched the numbers, and we decided that we needed a minimum of about 120 dog kennels for everything that the county was going to be bringing in, plus what Kirby's bringing in. That would kind of be our baseline. Let's start there. So we visited several shelters. We went to actually Bell County was the one that we most modeled our design on. If any of you, yeah, yay, they're awesome. You guys did a great job with that. For like peanuts too. I was like, who was your engineer? So we went and we toured that shelter, and that was actually the design that we stole the most from, because it was actually pretty ingenious, some of the stuff that they did that you could do for cheap with it. So if any of you guys are thinking about designing a shelter, go visit Bell County and just see what they did. Yeah, I just cruised through there last week, and I was thinking about, I got to go by there again. So that was the shelter we ended up stealing the most from. Just what we ended up designing was kind of like my dream shelter, kind of knowing that we weren't going to get the dream shelter, but hey, let's throw it out there. Let's go for gold and let them chop it back. So we thought, oh, they'll chop it back, cut our budget in half or something. The dream shelter was going to be somewhere around $3 to $3.5 million. Just, because of the size and you guys got so lucky with the engineers you had. That was half of y'all's cost taken off the table. It was nowhere near doable with what they were giving us. They gave us $80,000. So, okay, well, it's $80,000 more than we had before. So let's see what we can do. So we downsized it. We said, okay, so obviously we can't have anything fluffy or cute, no really cool cat statues in the lobby or anything like that. So $80,000 will get us about a third of the way there, so let's cut it into 3 phases. And then we don't have to ask for the full $3 million up front, but we'll trick them into giving us the full $3 million over 3 years. So we did. We said phase 1, we'll do the first 60 kennels. They're indoor-outdoor kennels. It's nothing fancy, but it's somewhere comfortable for the animals to be while they're staying with us. Phase 2 was going to be 60 more kennels. When we went back and redesigned this off of the dream shelter, we kind of made it to where all you have to do is knock out one wall and expand it. So made it really easy to expand in our design. And then phase 3 is going to be like the administrative building, the cattery. It's going to have like your isolation areas, your laundry and dish areas, food storage, stuff like that. Each kennel will have its own kind of separate area for small amounts of stuff, but the administrative building is going to be like, where you can go in and actually store large amounts of stuff. So that was our 3 phases. So it became a 3-year plan. And this was 3 years ago, and we've just now gotten started on this. So, but this, again, like I said, it allowed us to budget the project over several budget years. Rather than asking for the full $3 million up front, we're only asking you for $80,000 more every year, which the Commissioner's Court, for some reason, likes that. So trying to get money for an animal shelter out of Bexar County Commissioner's Court was like blood out of a turnip. But it was better than what Kirby was able to do. Kirby, we don't have any business there. They don't have any money for this. So, okay, So we redesigned it, make it easy to add on to. Over the course of time as we were designing this and talking to actual architects and talking to the county attorneys and the city attorneys and the city manager and the county commissioners and everybody arguing back and forth about what needed to be in it, we were able to come up with an interlocal agreement that everybody could kind of agree on. And it details pretty exactly how it's going to be run. Bexar County is going to fund the construction of the shelter in 3 phases. Kirby is going to be responsible for the daily operation of the shelter, though. A big hang-up for Bexar County was we know we need somewhere to put our animals, but we don't really want to deal with it. We don't know how to deal with this. We don't want to do it. We don't want to be, if something has to be euthanized and there's bad press, we don't want to be involved in that, So they can throw money at it and they go, oh, it's Kirby. So that was great for them. That made them feel a little bit better. The shelter employees will be employed by the city of Kirby, but the shelter manager will be employed by Bexar County. So that kind of gave some middle ground to, if we're giving you money, we need to have some kind of control over it. And then Bexar County is going to be funding the employee spots. So basically Bexar County is going to pay Kirby, and then Kirby is going to use the money for whatever they need it for. And then Bexar County is going to fund the care for any animals that they impound, or that we impound. I'm with them now. As well as payroll for the shelter employees and the operating supplies. They're also going to provide facility maintenance. So again, Kirby's a small town, doesn't have a lot of money. That was a big concern for them was, are we going to get stuck if something goes wrong with this huge repair bill? In the interlocal agreement, basically what we worked out is that the shelter is being built on Kirby's property. But the shelter is being funded by Bexar County. So they're building the shelter for Kirby, and then Bexar County is going to lease the facility for $1 a month. So for the next 20 years. But that's what made the attorneys happy, so that's what we went with. And that way there was no conflict of interest if there was a split between the two, parties on something. Everybody was kind of covered under that. So after only 3 short years of political chaos, we finally broke ground on the first phase. It just happened in May. So actually they had broken ground a little bit before this, but by the time we got the photo opportunity to do it, it was, we had to just make it look like we were breaking ground for real right there on the curb. Yeah, it's for the newspaper. So, but we finally broke ground on it, and this was a long time coming. There was a lot of, I don't know how many of you guys are municipal shelters or county shelters where you have to deal with the governmental. You guys know the struggle. You guys know the struggle. When you go to your city council and say, hey, I need air conditioning in my kennel, you go, we have people that don't have air conditioning. We're not giving you air conditioning for the animals. So it's not something that happens fast. There's always a lot of red tape. The animal shelter tends to be the redheaded stepchild of any city or county. Nobody wants to throw any funding at it. So again, this was a long time coming. This was Andy and I doing a lot of convincing. So we expect phase 1 to be completed by, hopefully by spring. We keep setting it back by another couple of months. We've been saying it's going to be completed by October for the last 2 years. But we'll take what we can get. The initial 60 kennels will be fully operational, and then phase 2 will begin on our next budget year, which is October 1. So we're working on the budget now for that, trying to squeeze as much as we can so we can get a lot done in phase 2, hopefully. But we'll have operational kennels. We'll have construction going on around us. It's not ideal. We're only going to have 60. It's not the 120 that we need just yet, but it's a start. Right now, what Bexar County is doing is we're contracting with the city of San Antonio for holding space. So when us animal control officers go out in the field and we pick up animals, we take them to the city of San Antonio, but they have us limited to about 7 animals a day right now for the entire county that we can bring in. So if I get a mama with puppies, we're done. We can't, we either can't pick them up or we can't pick up anything else. So we probably get about 100 calls a day in the county for loose animals. Bexar County, the whole area is pretty bad for stray animals still. So we have to pick out of those 100 which 7 are the top priority, and anything else rolls over to the next day. So this is going to be 60 kennels. While it's not the full 120 that we need, 60 kennels is going to give us a lot more wiggle room, because now that mama with 6 puppies isn't our intake for the day. That's 1 kennel full instead of our entire intakes for the day full. So this is going to solve a lot of the challenges that Bexar County has had in the time that they've had their own animal control, which has been about 3 years now. So kind of relying on everybody else to give us space. And so it's not the end. There's still going to be a lot more coming. Like I said, we're anticipating soon that first phase is going to be done, and then we're going to be moving on to phase 2. And we're hoping to get phase 2 and 3 combined into one, because they see that we did such a great job, and so they want to throw more money at it, but we'll see how that works out. That's more or less the story.